his dad was there with him. He must have only been about, I don't know, 8 or 9 or something. And they're obviously getting autographs and stuff. And I heard his dad say, "You'll know who he is as soon as he says something." So I said, "Did you enjoy the game?" And his face just went wide-eyed and open mouth.
Yeah, it's really strange in these cans right now. It's quite odd.
Well, we need to leave this in. That is an informal start to the show, but welcome to Reservoir Red Dogs.
Oh,
That
are we
is
off?
Well, I think so. That's a nice story to have in, isn't it? That
Well,
shouldn't
why
be. That shouldn't just be.
I was already recording.
See, he just knew.
He
He knew it was going to be gold.
He knows, doesn't he?
Welcome to Reservoir Red Dogs, the voice you've already heard. The iconic sound of a man who's commentated on the Reds since 1991, an astonishing 28 years, being the voice of Nottingham Forest on the radio for listeners all around the world. It's Radio Nottingham's And I Follow's legendary Colin Fray. Colin, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. Yeah, great to be here.
You have. I mean, it is. We were talking about this. It is almost like when you see, what's his name, who wrote Family Guy? Seth MacFarlane, when he does Peter Griffin, or when you see the guy that does Homer Simpson. Yeah. It's almost like you're doing an impression of Colin Fray. Because all the great commentators have these iconic voices, Motson, Moore, even modern ones like Tyler. And yours is such a distinctive... I mean, I'm sure it's a voice...
Can you do him?
I don't think I can. I think it's really hard... Because there's not...
You can do Motti. You can chat to him as Motti.
I could do a sort of a passable John Watson impression. Funnily enough, Colin, it's the second time we met in as many as 28 years. The first game, of course, Nottingham Forest beating Chelsea 7-0 at home. As well they might have done, Trevor. But they obviously it's a version of your voice that's kind of projected to suit football commentary. But then you end up sounding like a commentator all day long.
Well, I mean, I guess I ought to be good at doing Colin Fray, didn't I, in terms of the voice? But yeah, I mean, I think it's now. When I first started, it probably wasn't my voice. It was probably a bit put on. If you listen back to the really old stuff, and I cringe when I hear it now, it was almost Welsh, because the guy that I based myself on was Peter Jones. You're probably too young. Do you remember Peter Jones?
I don't remember
young.
Peter Jones.
No, you'll be too young.
I bet Johnny Owen will remember him.
Johnny Owen.
Johnny be there going, "Oh, Peter Jones, a great man he was."
And a Welshman. Do you know what? That wasn't
Hugh
far
Johns.
off.
Hugh Johns, the famous Midlands commentator as well. Hugh Johns. Do you remember Hugh Johns?
Yeah.
Huge ones.
Yeah.
That's what he was called, famously, yeah.
Delete your internet history before you come on the podcast.
But it was Peter Jones for me that I'd sort of wanted to be. I'd grown up and I'd kind of thought, well, I want to be him. I want to do what he does. And so I kind of based everything that I did on his style. And then, so that's kind of, you can hear overtones of that when I first start in the really old stuff. And then that's just sort of become myself more and more as the years have gone on.
I think loads of great singers do that as well, don't they? Start off, emulating and...
I think
you can certainly hear it in Bowie with with Scott Walker and things like that. You can and some of his Dylanisms early doors, and then develops his own voice and more confidence, and then it just you become.
Yeah,
yourself.
I think that's what it is. It was almost at the start, you're almost a persona, because you haven't got the confidence in yourself and in your own ability, so you take on somebody else's persona for a bit, and then as you say, the more confidence you get in your own ability and the more belief you get in yourself, then it just sort of all comes out.
You find your voice, boys. I think that's the artistic term for it, isn't it?
You do.
Like a
you
band that's
Yeah.
based. They reckon that people like Matisse and Picasso, they can all draw like Da Vinci, but then they break themselves down and they find their own voice. So I think.
And they all
Colin's a
tried
bit
to sound
that.
like Hugh Jones when they started, didn't they? Picasso was a great fan of 1960s football commentary. So, as a boy, Colin, did you want to be a football commentator? Was that the dream?
Yeah. I think it started fairly young with me. We used to live overseas, so basically the only bit of English football we ever got was on the World Service on a crackly radio.
So was that a military family?
That was a military family, yeah. That was my background. So my very earliest memories of listening on the radio are on the World Service, in the loft, crackly radio, because that's the only place we could get it. We were in Norway, of all places.
Wow.
So in the loft with the old transistor radio, and
Sounds like 1932 or something.
it kind of almost. I mean, you're not far off. And that's when I first started hearing the likes of Alan Parry, as it was then on Radio 2, and Peter Jones, largely because that's why we wanted to listen on those occasions, commentating on Forest in Europe. So that was sort of my first introduction. So there's my team on the radio, and obviously living abroad, you're not bombarded with it. You don't get the telly like you do now. You didn't even when you were living in this country in those days. So that was my first introduction, and that just sounded so cool.
So then how do you go about becoming a football commentator? Because so many people want to do it, but so few ever achieve it.
Yeah, well, if it's confession time, there's I used to, Subbuteo, Subbuteo,
yeah.
I used to commentate when I was playing that. That's how I started.
Brilliant.
Great.
So I used to commentate on Subbuteo matches, and my mum used to belt at the top of her voice for me to shut that noise up. And then I moved on to actually other people hearing it by when we were having a kickabout on the pitch. I used to commentate on our kickabouts.
Yeah, I used to do that.
I used to do that as well, yeah.
And one or two people sort of said, do you know what, you're all right at that, you can do that. So I kind of thought then, well, all right, I'll bear that in mind. That's all right. That's okay as a bit of feedback from playing football on the local field. But my way into radio was very different because I was doing something completely different. I was selling foreign exchange with a famous company that's just no longer with us. And I saw an advert for the BBC were combined up with a sponsor in the days when they must have been allowed to do that. But you can't do that very often these days. And they were looking for the amateur commentator of the year. So somebody who doesn't do commentary now, has never done commentary, doesn't get paid for commentary, but wants to have a try at it.
So it was a talent competition
it was
for commentators.
effectively a talent competition
Brilliant
for commentators
idea.
that was kind of half run by the BBC and then half by the sponsors who were Fosters. And I don't know why Fosters, but the prize was good. So I kind of entered that, and all I did was I recorded myself on an old cassette tape and sent it in because it was before the days of email and MP3s and WAVs and all the rest of it. You couldn't just email it off. So I recorded myself on a cassette tape in the front room watching a video of the League Cup final when we beat Luton 3-1. And I did, 10, 15-minute chunk, which included a couple of the goals. Sent it off, thought nothing more of it, and then got a letter or a phone call or something a few weeks later and said, you've made it through to the regional finals. Went over to Birmingham, to Pebble Mill, BBC Pebble Mill in Birmingham, and competed in the regional final. Won that, got through to the national final. Went down to London and did a bit of football commentary, a bit of tennis commentary as well, and ended up winning that.
Oh, word.
So won the national final, and then because I was from this patch, they got in touch with Radio Nottingham, to Martin Fisher, who was the sports editor in those days, and said, we're running this competition, a guy from your patch has just won it, you might want to get him in and have a chat.
I had no idea such a thing
did.
existed.
No.
And that's where well, to be fair, I think it only ran for another year or so after that. And then probably that idea of the BBC partnering with a sponsor kind of got put by the wayside. And nowadays they do run the BBC, which is a really good thing. They run a young commentator of the year for under 16s, I think it is, and they tend to do that every year, which is good. But I think probably the competition that I won was only around for maybe one more year after that. But what's interesting is the people that I met in the national finals, most of them have gone on to have careers. It's really nice to kind of see those names that you had never met before until you had that 2 or 3 days down in London, and they all sort of made it as well.
But you go from that League Cup finals 1989.
Yeah.
You then start commentating for us in 1991. So it's a really quick. You sort of get straight in the door.
It's fairly quick. Well, yeah. I mean, in terms of that initial kind of chat with Martin, and I was a guest like this on one of his programmes one night, and then he sort of gave me an opportunity in 91, which was the Chelsea game, the first game, the 7-0, which is an extraordinary start. So I kind of, and that was my first day, and that was in the day. I mean, this tells you how long ago it was. The extraordinary thing is that Forest had beaten Chelsea 7-0 in the top flight, and national radio haven't got anybody there. So Radio 2 or 5 or whatever it was, I think it was probably 5 by then, haven't got a reporter. So in those days, they didn't send reporters to every game in the top flight. So they then get this story developing where Forest are hitting 7 against Chelsea. So I ended up having to do stuff for them as well. So first day for Radio Nottingham, I end up being on Radio 5 as well, doing report after the game that, just talking about how good Forest were and stuff. So, but that's extraordinary in this day and age, isn't it? That national radio weren't at the top flight game.
And in terms of your role in the way people perceive Forest, obviously you don't work for the club, you work for the BBC, but so many people experience Forest through you, which kind of makes you part of the club and not. I mean, obviously Duncan Hamilton wrote his book, Provided You Don't Kiss Me, about his relationship with Brian Clough, and effectively what it's like to be a journalist embedded in a club to some extent.
Yeah.
Is yours a similar experience to his in that regard?
Yeah, I think it is. It's a fine line, really. I mean, obviously, I'm a BBC journalist, so I'm not employed by the club in any way, and I can't be employed by the club in any way. I can't be influenced by the club in any way. I have to be completely objective. But where local radio comes in is that you also have to slant everything towards that club. Now, it doesn't mean I have to be mega positive all the time, and I'm not mega positive all the time. This year, I'm pretty positive.
Yes. Well, this is going to go out in about 3 or 4 weeks. So we should say at this point, Forest are doing well.
At the time of recording.
At the time of recording, yeah.
But, some of the last 25 years, there hasn't been much to be positive about. So I'm not there to be a cheerleader for the club, and I can't be there to be a cheerleader for the club. And sometimes it is a fine line that you have to tread, because sometimes you have to upset people. Well, you don't have to upset people, but sometimes people might get upset by something you've said. But my
Do you ever
philosophy...
get Welsh directors trying to influence you or bribe you?
Not yet.
Not
yet.
Unplug him.
So look, the thing that I stick to and always adhere to is that I don't sensationalise. I don't go over the top one way or the other. I stick to the truth. I call it as I see it, and I stick to the truth, and I think I'm very fair in how I call it. And if they're playing rubbish, I'll say they're playing rubbish. And sometimes they do play rubbish. I'm not there to polish the you-know-what.
No, you're not a propagandist.
I'm not a propagandist, and nor should I be.
Yeah.
I have to be objective in my job. And there are people that want me to be more positive, I'm sure, and be a cheerleader for the club. But that isn't my role. That's not what I'm there for.
But you've got to be impartial, but also the audience that is listening to you is Forest fans.
Yes.
So then you're trying to be impartial whilst remember that you've got a partial audience.
That's where local radio comes in, because on local radio, I can slant everything towards Forest.
Yeah.
So that partial audience is getting the viewpoint of the game from a Forest perspective. So it's not, as I say, it's not all about being positive about Forest, but it is about seeing the game through Forest fans' eyes and through a Forest perspective. And that's something you can do far more on local radio than you would be able to on national. Because nationally, you've obviously got to be right down the middle, and you've got to see it from both sides' perspective. On local radio, very much, you're right. The Forest fans want to hear about what Forest players doing what Forest are doing well, rather necessarily than what the opposition are doing well. Although there is a place for that as well. If there's an opposition player who's dominating the game, I'm going to talk about him because he's dominating the game. But I'll talk about him in such a way of Forest have got to get hold of him.
And have you ever forgotten yourself or come close to forgetting yourself when a particularly important goal has been scored, or there's a moment? Have you ever found yourself going, "Get in"?
Yeah.
Any that specifically spring to mind?
The first feeling of it was, and it happens quite a lot when Forest are playing Derby, to be fair.
Yes, of course.
But the first real memory of that sort of moment I have is a night game. John Gregory was in charge of Derby. Darren Huckabee was on loan at Forest. So
that when we were pushing for promotion.
02-03, I think.
That's right, yeah. And then I think we beat Norwich the week after or around that time.
Something like that,
It was bonkers, that game.
Beat them 3-0.
It was amazing.
Played them off the park and hammered them 3-0. But the first goal, I think it was the first goal, was a cross from the left-hand side, and Harewood's got up at the back post and just heads in. And my commentary, as it goes in, is just, yes!
Come on! Who are you?
And that's the first time, really, that I kind of got a bit carried away. But, I mean, it kind of, you have to be professional, so immediately what kicks in is, right, what's just happened? Forest have scored, so what's the score? So the next thing after the yes is Forest 1, Derby 0, because that's you've got to give the score. That stands to reason. If there's a goal, what's the score?
And are you told, do they say, look, try and remind people of the score every 10 minutes? Talk about the shape of the team every 5 minutes, to paint a picture?
There are certain guidelines. I mean, every commentator is different in the way they do it, but the general guideline amongst commentators is give the score every 3 minutes. Because, there are obviously people that are tuning in all the time, and they want to know what the score is. And if it's any longer than if the maximum they have to wait is 3 minutes, I'm sure somebody's done the research, somebody's looked at it psychologically or something. If the maximum they have to wait is 3 minutes, then they're all right. If it goes any longer than that, then they start getting frustrated and shouting at the radio, "What's the score? Tell me what the score is." So the general guideline that I try and stick to is every 3 minutes. Now, there are moments during the game or during a game when sometimes you have to do that more than that. So, for instance, if you're a goal ahead or a goal behind and time is ticking away and it's getting more and more dramatic and you're under siege, ball is, your penalty area is being bombarded, then you can build up the tension and the drama by giving the score more often. So in that instance, you're sort of every 30 seconds reminding people of the score, because this is the stage of the game and it's obviously more important. As if you're hanging on by a goal or you're behind by a goal and you're desperately launching forward.
And presumably you have to find creative ways to keep saying that in a different way. So Forest still a goal behind. A goal now for Forest would bring them over. You can't keep going, it's 1-0. It's 1-0. It's 1-0. Still 1-0. 1-0.
Yep, you're right. There's all sorts of ways you can do it. See,
they need an equaliser. A leveller could be on the cards here. Well, just because what I find fascinating about your job is you're a broadcast journalist, but you're also a performer. It's kind of
I guess so in a way. Yeah,
it's journalism meets showbiz. So, do you get? Do you listen to yourself back? Do people give you feedback? Do they say, "Colin, look, you're a bit shouty"? Or do they say, or whatever it is, do they give you guidance? Do they say, what I would do actually is maybe not keep referring to the formation too much early on, or does that sort of stuff not happen?
It happens to a certain extent, and that kind of depends who your boss is, really. And, just like Forest, I've had a few over the years. So it kind of depends, really. I mean, some of the bosses are not really interested in football. So if they're not football fans, they're not going to be football commentary fans. Therefore, they're not really going to know what I need to do in football commentary, and that's fair enough. There are other things that you have to do as well that we kind of call in Radio Land, we call it furniture, and people will be more prepared to talk to me about that, if I'm not signalling what's coming next on the radio station.
At 6 o'clock, it's the drive time phone in. Or whatever.
You're listening to BBC Radio Nottingham.
Yeah.
This is Match Day on BBC Radio Nottingham. It's the home of live Nottinghamshire sport, all that kind of stuff. Because the other thing is that the way audiences are measured.
Yes,
Radar, which is a really weird system and a really odd
some
way.
People just have diaries and they
diaries
record.
and just fill it in.
So that's why you have to keep telling people.
Keep telling people who you're listening to.
Radio Nottingham.
Because people might think, well, I listen to the football, but I don't know what it was on.
Yeah.
So it's my job, from a radio station's point of view, to make sure that they know they were listening to the football on BBC Radio Nottingham.
There's still a goal down on Radio Nottingham. They need an equaliser here on the home of Match Day on Radio Nottingham.
Something struck me earlier when you. It seems to me that there's a kind of a grey area, and this is why my dad watches the football with the sound off. So there's kind of a grey area for a commentator, like you said, being impartial and telling the audience what's happening. Because when you said, the midfielder being overrun, in your opinion, sometimes it's quite clear.
Yeah.
But how much do you feel that you know the game? Because sometimes, having played, I'll listen to a commentator and I'll go, "You're completely wrong. They're letting him have the ball in order to do that and do that." How much do you feel you know the game? And do you feel sometimes when you go into that area, you're like, I'm going into opinion too heavily here?
I think it's a very good point you make, and it's exactly right. And it's something that I picked up very early. I mean, I've watched a lot of football, so I kind of, without bigging myself up too much, I think I know the game. But
I
I've
can be
never
sat
played
in a
it.
pub. Yeah, I can be sat in a pub with 20 people who think they know the game.
Yeah.
And be have such a strong opinion. And the second you go, well, they're not doing that. But what do you know? And you're like, okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
And you just have to back down.
You're right. The area where I am very careful, and you'll appreciate this as an ex-player, is that you'll rarely hear me criticise a player on an individual basis, because that's not for me to do, because I've never played the game. I don't know what's going through that player's mind. I don't know what that player's been told by his coach or his manager or the coaching staff. I don't know what's going on in that player's life away from the football pitch or anything like that. It's not my job. I've never been there. I can say that the striker's had a great chance and missed the target, because that's happened. I've seen that.
And
I
you
know
wouldn't
it's a
drift
great
into,
chance.
he should have gone across the goalkeeper there, or he
I'm
should
not
have
gonna do
tried to
that.
do this. Or...
I'm not going to do that. That's where Steve Hodge and Steve Sutton and Brian Laws
Okay.
come in.
Okay.
That's why you have to have a professional with you.
Yeah.
Because if they want to be critical of him, whoever the player might be, that's their job to do that. If they want to, because they've been there, they've done it, they know what that player should have done in that situation. I think I might know what that player should have done in that situation. And sometimes I might ask the question, should he have squared that back, Steve, rather than going for goal from that angle? They'll come in with the answer.
Okay, that's interesting.
So I am quite careful of that, because I am aware that there could be accusations levelled at me that, well, how do you know? You've never played the game, and they're absolutely right. Played it to
But it's the same at player level,
a very
coach level.
low standard. But
Like I can have I got quite an intimate knowledge of how the structure of the game works and what should be happening essentially. But then you sit and talk with someone like, I don't know, Charlie McPartland about football, and you go, I'm a layman, I know nothing. People, coaches that have studied how everything works and how you need to what you do to manipulate this and in order to move that and do this, and you can just sit there going, I know nothing.
But then where the medium dictates a certain level, though, doesn't it? Because you're on radio, not telly. So a TV viewer watching it with commentary can see and make up for their own mind.
Yeah.
You do have to say he had loads of space or there was no one near him, because
and I'll
I'm
say
trying
that
to visualise it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
that's a fact. That's a fact. I've got to be. I mean, the really old adage about radio commentary is you're everybody else's eyes. If they can't see it, they're not at the game, they can't see the match, you're their eyes. That's the fundamental principle for me, is that I've got to give as much description as I possibly can of everything that's happening. So to talk about where the player was on the pitch and how close the nearest defender was and what a good opportunity it was or not, that is all a matter of fact. So I'm quite happy to give as much detail in that situation as I possibly can.
And in terms of the dynamic between the commentator and the summariser, because other broadcasters, let's say, there have been infamous stories elsewhere of relationships between commentators and pundits where perhaps commentators might have felt that the pundit is straying into commentary.
Yeah.
Is there a clear division of labour? Are you like, I'm the one who describes what's happening, you give an opinion, or are they allowed to give it? Are they allowed to kind of
It's like me and you.
say a bit? Well,
When I ask a question.
your questions are the best ones.
Yeah, but you glare at me when I do it.
No, I don't. I look
know
at you
you don't.
adoringly. It's a very similar look.
Very similar looks.
But isn't that? Do you go, come on, Brian, you're commentating now, that's my job, for instance?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really happen, but you're right. If it did, I would. Yeah.
You stay over
Now,
there.
shut up.
I wonder how much, in terms of your, it's not so much recognition, but in terms of your role has changed since the growth of online listening. So, for instance, I don't live in Nottingham, so I can't listen to Radio Nottingham through the iPlayer whilst the Forest commentary is on because of the licensing with iFollow or Forest Player or whatever it's called. But what that does mean is there's people all over the world, all over the UK, listening to you as a TV commentator, really, because sometimes they can watch the image as well. Have you noticed that? I don't know if you get fan mail or letters or just your reach has increased since these online players have started.
Yeah, it certainly has, and obviously social media as well, which is didn't exist when I started doing stuff. So with Twitter and Facebook and Instagram as well. I mean, the really interesting thing is that we started the program with talking about the voice, and people who hear the voice suddenly know who you are. But the introduction of doing Facebook Lives over the last couple of years, now people know what I look like as well, which is most disconcerting. When you're in the supermarket and people go like that, and I better explain, haven't I?
Colin Fray
Because
goes
that's what
for
I
the
do on the
milk,
radio.
tries to get the butter as well,
It's like-
moves along the aisle, keeps it going. Got to be back for 4 o'clock.
Will you say something for us?
Do you have
that
a phrase
guy off the radio?
If people ask you to say something, do you have a stock phrase that you just kind of think, well, that's my phrase to say?
I tend not to really. I just sort of chat really. It's like the lad at Blackburn. Did you enjoy the game? It doesn't really matter what
That's
you
like
say.
turning down an autograph,
They
isn't
just
it?
want to. They just want to hear what you say, don't they?
Talking,
Yeah.
They don't want it as long as you say something. They just want to hear the voice. That's it. But yeah. So to go back to your point about expanding the reach. Yes, obviously now there are a lot of Facebook comments and stuff like that come into us from abroad, and people who are grateful that those kind of services now exist, because I go back to my days of being a kid in Norway, and nothing like that existed. So you're picking up scraps basically off the last 20 minutes on World Service or something like that. But
You still
now,
go back and listen to those, to that era of just because of the sound, the feel, the warmth.
yeah, the commentaries. Yeah, we've still got all the Forest in Europe stuff is all on archive back in the office, and you kind of listen to that.
Oh, you've got to go in.
One of those sensory rooms from here.
Just have to cross his legs.
Go in there with a lava lamp. And just,
If you've got somebody who can bring it to life for you through that little box that's in the corner, or through that little machine with an apple on it, I just think there's something that's a bit more hairs on the back of the neck can stand up, rather than if you're watching it on the telly.
and also, you make it sound more exciting than it is. That's so crucial. Most football games, frankly, in the Championship, aren't that good to watch for 90 minutes.
Yeah.
There'll be periods where you go, oh, that was quite good. But it's a hard watch sometimes. But if you listen on the radio, like, that game sounded incredible. I think the two things that are better on the radio are Prime Minister's Questions and football. Because I think on the radio, you think it always sounds more raucous than it actually is.
I like comedy on
sometimes.
the radio. I really like comedy on the radio.
Yeah, there's something different. You know what? I think in a way it's kind of like vinyl. There's a way that radio sounds. We live in this HD, 4K, whatever it is now era where everything is just so. Whereas with radio, you go under a bridge and you get you get that kind of 5 Live. Even in this era of DAB, you're constantly trying to get the signal right.
5 Live's a nightmare on the radio. Permanently.
Can I just say, Absolute Radio, of course, has a fantastic signal across the UK, particularly between 2 and 5 on a Saturday.
But it's interesting you say this, because I think TalkSport as well, they're having, and BBC Radio obviously, the viewing figures are as high as ever.
Well, this is it, and it's partly, obviously, it's due to, how people consume stuff, isn't it?
Talking of consuming
Driving
stuff, do you realise every time I pour myself a water, I'll pour the guest one,
I
and
know,
I'll
but there
pour
was-
you one. What? There's none left, so you
There's
have
not
it.
much left. I was just.
And I always pour everyone else first before me, and you're walloping this.
Can I just say as well, just dear listener, at the start of the show, I did pour you a water.
Oh, all right.
So
Okay.
there is that.
One to my... Okay, go on then.
Now, there's a few things that we definitely need to cover, Colin. Firstly, I was just fascinated in terms of how your relationship with the club has or hasn't changed depending on who owns or manages the club. I was going to think particularly around sort of
I know what's coming.
2013.
I knew that was coming.
For example.
Mr. Davies.
Yes. That was odd. That was. That is the most strained, obviously, time that I've ever been involved with the club, and the thing that made it a bit weird was that I never really found out what it was all about.
So this is when Billy Davies started basically banning media from the ground.
Yeah, and refusing to do interviews and doing some really strange things like a post-match press conference pre-match.
Was he talking in the past tense about the game before the game?
He knew he had a commitment to do a press conference.
But what was he actually saying?
Good point.
It kind of, from memory, it got bogged down by some members of the national press, I think, talking more about the whole situation, about why he's been acting the way he's been, why he's not been talking to journalists, and why he's doing this, and so
I just want to talk about the game we've just seen.
yeah, or the game we're going to see. Great win, wasn't it? Fantastic.
Typical of you lot.
Well done for being.
And I remember seeing some of his press conferences where he'd say he was conducting them like they were police interviews. He'd say, "I see respect to that. No comment." It's not 24 hours in police custody. This is a football club.
Yeah.
Colin, I hear your question. I see respect to that. No comment. You're like, what? Just say, I can't answer that. You know I can't answer that. Or whatever it is. Find a better form of words than no comment. But
I don't know what it was all about. I still don't know what it was all about. And I thought it was, it was strange. It was both strange and strained.
But was he trying to, do you think, manufacture a siege mentality and kind of create a kind of Millwall environment where it's the players against the world?
Could have been. Not? Could have been. And I've heard that said about him, that he kind of needs that sort of mentality to function.
Yes.
What I would say is that during his first spell in charge, he was one of, possibly the most helpful manager that I've dealt with in the whole time that I've been involved. Now, I might be forgetting one or two there, and I apologise to anybody if I've just upset anybody, if there are any ex-managers listening.
Paul Hart, Stuart Pearce, Joe Kinnear, Alex McLeish, Steve McLaren.
You've got the list written down there.
Oh, no, it's just sad.
It's a whole mixture of, obviously, they've all got different personalities, and they all treat the press in different ways. Billy Davies, was one of the most helpful managers that I've ever dealt with. In terms of giving me his telephone number, ring me up anytime you want, just run things by me.
No comment.
and just, I got on really well with him. Not just me, but other members of the press as well. And we all got on very well with him. And he had a very good, I thought, relationship with the press. So when he came back, I remember I was actually away. I think I'd gone away on holiday, but I'd heard he was coming back. So I texted him and said, looking forward to welcoming you back. Let's go for a coffee when I get back in a couple of weeks' time. Be great to see you back again. He texted me back. I don't think it had been confirmed at that time, so he had to be very careful with the way he phrased his text back. But yeah, hopefully see you soon, Colin, something like that. By the time I'd got back from holiday, gone. Everything blanked. Nothing anymore coming from that direction. So it made it even more strange, given how well I thought we'd got on and the good relationship that we'd had during the first.
Because there was a period where it looked like Radio Nottingham might not do Forest commentary.
Oh, absolutely.
As a result.
Absolutely. The season, the year that season started, when he was at the club, because he'd come in at the February, March time.
Yeah.
At the end of one season, and then so the next season, that summer, we were out of contract in terms of commentary deal, and the deal itself actually got done and signed, I think, on the Friday night before the season started.
My God! Oh my God! Dysfunctional
so
doesn't quite.
We had no idea whether we were actually going to be doing commentary the next day or not.
But that would have affected your job. I mean, would you have then gone to whoever would have provided the commentary?
I
shouldn't ask you that.
It depends on the offer, I suppose, wouldn't it?
Just if any of the broadcasters are listening to this, Colin is open to offers, it seems, at some point in the future. When I think about your voice and the moments I've experienced, great Forest moments through you in a way, I think of the Collymore goal that got us promoted in 1994.
Yes, that wasn't me.
You're kidding. I always thought it was.
No, that wasn't me.
Matthew.
That at Peterborough.
Yeah.
No, that was Martin. That was Martin Fisher. What happened that day was that Peterborough went 2-0 up.
Yeah.
You've
And
broken him now. Look, it's all right, mate.
I got both Peterborough goals,
Yeah.
and he got all 3 Forest goals. So that one wasn't me.
That was confusing for a young boy.
But it was iconic.
Okay, I'll tell you the one that I do. It was iconic. The one I do remember you doing was the 1959 FA Cup final. Tell me that was you.
Just say yes.
The promotion game against Yeovil. Because what I really remember about that is actually, I was at the game, but loads of people around us were listening to it on the radios. I think Doncaster needed to win, and they'd gone a goal down, or they were behind. And what I remember is I think Chris Commons was about to take a corner down in front of the Trent end, and all of a sudden this just noise goes off, and I saw players reacting to it, and it was just so many people were listening. There was enough of an audible cheer in the ground. So many people were listening to the radio, and then news starts filtering round, and then it was. So I remember on the day the effect of the news that you're delivering, and then I bought the DVD of that game afterwards, and I feel emotional listening to it now. When you're going, there's a party starting at the City Ground. You're like, that's exactly what it's like, and you hear what's incredible. It must have been amazing for you to deliver this news, because usually you're talking to the people not in the stadium.
Yeah.
But on that day, and I'm sure it's happened on other times when you've heard people react, and you've said, is that the only time? Or maybe the most profound time where you've said something and people inside the stadium are reacting to what you've said.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. It's fantastic that you pick up on it, because it's probably the highlight of however many years. 28, did you say?
28.
However many years it's been.
1991.
It's certainly one of the highlights. And going back to what we were talking about a few minutes ago, Paul, about how I've never played the game certainly at any reasonable level, but that's as close as I ever got to the feeling of being a player and scoring. Oh. Because exactly what you say.
Influencing the crowd to that level.
Yeah, absolutely. Doncaster 0, Cheltenham 1, or whatever it was. Cheltenham 1, Doncaster 0. Huge cheer goes up.
It was amazing.
And it was just that feeling. That must be what it's like to score a goal. In my world,
amazing.
I've just said something.
Yeah.
There's my voice saying something, and everybody's reacted to it like that. So that was that was certainly one of the highlights on that day, and the whole way Forest went about it that day. And
I love it to this day.
I think technically you played a stadium gig that day. You performed with 30,000 people. That's like...
Are you just trying to shoehorn in another Noel Gallagher impression?
Not at all. No. But that's like that's like your main role, isn't it? You played the City Ground. That must have been incredible. That because what I loved about that day, and obviously seen Forest relegated since promoted to the Premier League, but. On that day, I don't think anyone really thought we were going to go up automatic. We've kind of resigned ourselves to the playoffs psychologically. And then all of a sudden you're like, hang on, we're winning. Commons and McGugan were phenomenal that day. And then you're like, oh my God, Doncaster are losing.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it was like, oh, we're going to go up. And it was the surprise of it all that kind of made it.
Yeah, it was. And again, you go back to the drama of it and building up on the radio and stuff like that. It wasn't on the telly that day. So if you weren't at the game, it was radio. But even if it was on the telly, you still wouldn't, I don't think, quite have got the drama.
No.
Because we in the studio had a feed of that other game. We knew instantly what was happening score-wise, just from our local radio colleagues at BBC Sheffield who cover Doncaster. So we had a feed of their commentary. So the instant that a goal went in, it was then relayed into my headphones. And instantly I have given the score out. So that idea that the drama of what's happening in front of you is also building because of what's happening somewhere else, completely remote, that nobody's got access to, is something that I think on the radio that day really helped to build up that drama.
Definitely.
And I'm not sure if in TV, even if they were covering both games, and I don't think they were covering either, but even if they were covering both, there would have been a little bit more of a delay. It wouldn't have been quite as instant. And so by the time the TV had given that information out, look what's just happened at this game, it's already filtered round.
Yes.
Because of the instantaneousness of radio.
I love your analogy of it being like scoring a goal.
It was great.
I've never thought of it like that.
It was the closest I will ever come, I'm sure. unless the same thing happens when it's promotion to the Premier League.
Oh, fingers crossed. And then winning the Premier League, Champions League, all that. As you can imagine, we had a full post bag in our email inbox. we just don't have the time to get through them all. But Martin Teal said, how close have you ever come to swearing on air? And what or who made you almost let rip with a naughty word?
Once or twice I've come close. We always have a bit of a gag and a bit of a joke about what it would be like to one day switch the transmitter off and do the real commentary.
So what would that sound like? Give us a flavour. You're allowed to swear on the show or say whatever you like.
I just think, when there's a pass that goes astray or whatever, and it is not great, and I'll say, oh, he's knocked it 3 yards behind him with his 10-yard pass, and it's gone straight out for a throw. Wasn't very good, was it, Brian? There would be an obvious S word there, wouldn't there?
For sake! What a load of old...
I'm sorry, that was just...
Let it be known, Matt Ford just poured himself another glass of water. No, it's fine.
Away. Would you like?
Thank you.
That's Dire Straits, isn't it?
It was Dire Straits, yeah. Nicely.
I think. Go on then. Thank you.
Colin.
I think it would be. I think if you could do something like that and stick it out as a podcast, I think it might get a few listeners.
That's a great
idea.
The
best ones are always in the pub, as we always say, don't we? The best, if we could just stick a microphone in the pub when we take the guests back and the stories keep going and then get looser and looser and naughtier and naughtier.
People won't be surprised to hear this, but Alan Rogers in particular.
Oh, good grief. Yeah.
My word.
The three of us were just silent listening to him in the boozer afterwards.
If that was ever put out, say, on Channel 4 late night, that channel would face like a parliamentary inquiry.
Yeah. And he'd be in jail.
We had a great question here from Scott, who got in touch and said, what do you like most and what do you like least about your job?
My job is about far more than just commentating on Forest. That's the thing. I mean, as I said earlier, there's only two of us that are responsible for covering the whole of the sporting gamut of Nottinghamshire, as well as obviously lots of freelancers that are brought in. But in terms of full-time members of staff, there's just the two of us. So there's an awful lot, as there is with any job, there's a lot behind the scenes, boring stuff that I'm not going to go into here. That is just the kind of bane of my life, really. But when you've got a Wednesday night or a Tuesday night and a Saturday afternoon to look forward to, you kind of just... you live for those moments, don't you? And it's, most of my job is great because most of my job is radio production and thinking about the next programme and what can we put in that and who we're going to talk to this week and, what stories can we get out of them, and then into the actual commentary itself, which has always been the highlight and always will be of what I do.
And do you have a routine on match day before you're going to commentate? Do you have like a particular aftershave, a song or anything like that?
Lucky pants.
Yeah, do you put your shirt on just before you leave the house? Is there any kind of... Do you have a particular meal? Do you think, right, I'm going to get up at 10 for a 3 o'clock kickoff. I'll just refresh my memory about the teams.
Not really. I don't really have a particular load of things that I'll do on a regular basis. I'm a little bit superstitious, but not really to the extent of what I wear or anything. The biggest superstition I've got, and I think you'll agree it's worked really well over the last 28 years because it's bringing Forest all sorts of luck, is that I always have to go into the same entrance into the main stand.
Okay.
Always go into the main stand. Because the thing is, if I don't, Forest might lose.
And then it's your fault.
And then it's my fault. And as I say, over the last 28 years, it's been brilliant, hasn't it? It's worked really, really well.
Maybe you do need to start going in different areas. This is what's held us back for all these years.
All my fault. Sorry, guys.
But do you ever think, right, I'm not having any chocolate because that's bad for the throat. I'm not going to have a banana because that makes my mouth claggy. Are you like, on match day, I'll have, a green pea salad? Do you think about that? Like, you don't want to over-carb because then your energy might...
Do you?
On gig days, I'm not having anything too heavy. I won't drink the night before. Just, I have those sort of routines.
You get claggy throatedness.
Oh, yeah, you're not meant to have chocolate before
broadcast. Cheese as well.
Milk. I think anything dairy, isn't it? Milk.
Is that right?
Somebody said milk, even milk in your tea or coffee. Have
I just offended you, by the way, saying you can't have cheese?
No, why? Why would that offend me? You're going to start... People are going to get the wrong impression.
Clearly, you're a man that loves cheese.
I do love cheese. Don't most people? This is not some kink or some niche internet hobby. Like, cheese is a mainstream pursuit. It's about time we got over that in this country. But do you think like that? Do you think, actually, I won't go to, I'm not going to have a full English?
Yeah, more so the night before. I'm always careful with the night before, and not having too many, because you need to be sharp. You've got to be sharp. You're on air from 1:30, and your pre-recording sometimes start half an hour before that or whatever. It's a long time actually through till 6 o'clock.
And to be fully alert the whole time.
You've got to be completely switched on.
I was just thinking then when you said not having too much the night before, the only time I've ever been in the commentary box at Forest, and I wasn't commentating, but I was badly hungover. It was when we played Swansea in the first leg of the playoff semi-final. And I couldn't get a ticket anywhere, but I was doing the overnight shows at Talk Sport at the time, so I'd never asked for any sort of freebie ever, and was like, "Can you get me in?" And Ian Dancer was doing the commentary, and they're like, "You can just sit next to Dance, keep your mouth shut, just I was like, "Fine." I'd gone out the night before to some party, ended up. It was one of these awful things where we'd end up spraying bottles. It was a rap party for a telly show I was working on, but we'd ended up spraying Carlsberg over each other like it was Formula One, and I was wearing a jacket. I woke up the following morning really still drunk, just put my clothes on and went to meet Dance. Anyway, I'm in this jacket that had lager sprayed over it the night before. I'm hanging bad with this hangover. I start to get hungover during the game. It had rained on me on the way in, and because this coat, the lager had dried, the rain then started to basically ferment the yeast. So I had these sort of patches of white. It stank, and it smelled like a pub carpet. I was just sat there basically fermenting in yeast, trying not to be sick. And Ian Danter, I'm sure listeners to this show will know, was just like, because I've never seen a man flick through a match day programme not reading it. just looking at it. None of it was going on. Just sat there going, "You cannot be sick in the commentary box at Forest. You'll never be allowed back in."
Your coat's basically got a fungal infection.
It's awful.
Rubbing Caniston all over your coat.
Oh, can coats drink cranberry juice? That was awful. I was like, oh, I can't. It was just so bad. So actually, I've had the experience of sitting in the commentary box at Forest hungover, and it's just not.
Yeah,
I wouldn't recommend
that.
Recommend it to no person. Colin, there's so much more we could have talked about. It would be great to get you back in at some point in the future. Well, let's see what happens with this season. Maybe we could do a retrospective at the end of it.
Oh, nice.
Been to all the
fine,
games.
whenever. Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming in. It's amazing to meet you, having listened to you for so many years, and have had. It's weird. Obviously, I adore players, and Paul thinks I'm weird for idolising football.
Well, I catch you staring at me. I find that odd.
It's when we're not here that it freaks you out. But to meet you as well, like you've been Forest to me in so many ways. When I can't get to games, it's you that tells me about it. So I'm sure so many fans feel like this when they meet you, but. In a way, thank you so much for kind of being Forest for us. I hope you realise how much what you do and the way you do it and how good you are at it means to us as fans.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's flattering to hear that, and I can still consider it a privilege. It's just. What Forest fan would not want my job? And I'm privileged to have had it for so long, and hopefully I'm still doing it to a level that people appreciate and are happy with, and I hope to continue for a long time.
Colin, this has been such a treat. Thank you so much for coming in.
Nice
it's been an absolute
Colin.
pleasure.
Really appreciate it.
Anytime.
It's been a real treat. Of course, you can email the show rrd1865@outlook.com. Tweet us at rrd1865, and please do share it amongst your friends on social media and leave us a review on iTunes or SoundCloud or wherever you listen to this. It helps other Forest fans find it. Till next time.
Cheers, guys.
You Reds.